to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta, and I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm excited to have on my show today, Mr. Tom Dutta. Hey, everybody, it's great to be here. I'm just kidding, everybody. Today's show will be a narrative-style talk by me. And I've been excited to do this talk. It's been on my mind, well, quite frankly, for most of my life. And what I want to tell you up front is make a disclaimer. Before I say that, this show is quite a lengthy show because I have a lot to say. You may want to listen to it in a couple sittings. I honor that if you share it with other people. I believe that some of the things I'm going to talk about could help others in the world. And I'm trying to take a world view as well. Here's my disclaimer to start off. Don't believe what I say. Don't do as I say. Please listen to what I know. John Wooden, a famous basketball coach, this is what he said, something to the effect that it's what you learn after you know it all that makes a difference. And I came into this world with an open mind. I'm going to be speaking purely from what my own experiences have been, not from others. And at times, if I sound judgmental, that is not my intent. For what I say forthcoming is what I believe. It was taught to me by my parents and other influencers, and how I parented my own children lies within those thoughts. I am a South Asian man. I look different. I have brown skin, black hair. I carry a British and Canadian passport. I came to this country as a little boy, well, with a British accent. Believe it or not, I can't believe that disappeared. I've always stood out because of those characteristics. However, I stepped up without selling out my cultural values to fit in. I'm reminded in my mind about the movie Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. It was a crazy, ridiculous movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a great one to catch. I believe you can get it streaming off your favorite supplier there. But Eddie Murphy really characterized a foreigner coming to a different land and being such a goofy person. He wanted to fit in, but he really didn't understand that land. So he maintained his own traditions and beliefs and acted the way he would back home. And well, he didn't fit in. He stood out. It's hilarious. And I love movies. But my movie will be the story of coming to Canada. Let me tell you that story as we start off the talk here. In the early 1960s, a little boy was born to Fijian parents on an island named Suva. He was born on a military base because, well, his father was in the British Army. His father was an aircraft technician. Soon after, his uncle Tom, his namesake, called and said something from a faraway land, a land named Canada, said to come live here. It's a promised land, he said, where children's dreams can be achieved. Or at least that is what he may have said to Tommy's mom, Anitra, and well, she was Uncle Tom's sister and his father, Ashok. Soon after traveling through the Far East, Singapore and Malaysia, where little Tommy contracted malaria, he was just hours away from his own death. He got well and he finished the journey to Canada, a place called Vancouver on the West Coast in British Columbia. And life began living in a basement street on Chambers Street with his father pumping gas at a local service station, his mom staying in the home to raise two boys who were 1 year apart. Welcome to Canada. And you might think about who that story was about. Stepping up without selling out is fitting in. That story, of course, it was me. I was an immigrant to this great country of Canada. Now I'm a Canadian. I was born in Britain, yes, Fijian, Indian parents. And the big decision my parents had to make was to change their belief system. And that enabled me to navigate my new homeland and fit in. Yes, let me make that clear. My parents owned the decision to change their belief systems when they brought us to a new land. I went on to graduate from high school with honors, receiving a scholarship, then to post-secondary university as a mature student while building my career. And yes, I started at the ground doing odd things, laboring in the summer, and I eventually stumbled into business because of mentoring from teachers. I became a manager at the early age of 21 and eventually a CEO at the age of 31. I didn't even know what it was. I just had a dream of making good money and that would create a better life. At least that's what I was told. I even attained the role of things like chairman of the board and became a thought leader with all of the work I do today. Many of you know me, but if you don't, you can find my bio on Create, my business website, www.create.ca. You'll know more about my work. It includes the Quiet Warrior radio show, which you're listening to now, my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, a TV show we did a couple of years ago about the work I do to help change people's lives, and some things we're working on now that will be announced. But how did all this happen? The thing I'm trying to tell you is not for my own ego, but how did I become successful in parts of my life when during my journey I observed many immigrants around me struggling to fit in? They were telling their woe is me stories about being treated differently. It's really funny, but people love to tell other people who are like them their stories. And I would come up to people, or immigrants would come up to me and they'd start complaining and talking about how they had no opportunities for us because of our skin color. I actually had a CEO sit across from me in a one-to-one coaching session once and say, let's face it, because of who we are and our color, nobody in this country is going to give us those big jobs. We have to create them. And I say that's BS. Or maybe how we sound, or how we look, or even how we smell. Yeah, that's right. I'm not kidding. How we smell defines how we're different in our opportunities. Are you kidding me? Or at least what I'm trying to say is that's how others may perceive someone on the outside. How we perceive someone on the outside. Now, here's my advice to you. Never, ever again tell your BS story, the story immigrants sometimes are telling themselves over and over again in their subconscious minds about not being enough, not being able to fit in. Stepping up without selling out your values, that's fitting in. So how did this all happen? Well, I want to digress. Many of you know that in the work I do developing people, I've mastered brain science. I've studied it to understand how the brain can shape our beliefs. Well, let's just tell you that you come into this world innocent. You have some 2 million neurons. These are little vessels in your brain that are empty. And right away, thoughts and emotions are being wired together by your brain and creating memories and putting them in that part of your brain. What defines us is in our wiring in our brains. And the fact is that part of our brain, our subconscious mind, doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction. So if I hold up an orange, a fruit, and I say this orange is yellow, our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. It believes that and goes out looking for more proof. I'm not making this up. This is well documented science. But the subconscious mind, the hard drive, it plays over 24/7. It continues to play and it controls everything we do, and it shapes our beliefs. It shapes our life. The question for you is, who is the most influential person that you know in your life when you were, say, the age of birth up to 10 or 12 years? For most of us, that's our parents. And well, our parents, here's the ugly truth. I believe parents who bring their children to a new land are responsible for stepping up without selling out their values and fitting in, period. No ifs, no buts. It's simple. So what does that all look like? Well, you knew it was coming. I got to go below the line on this. I want to talk about that for a minute. Below the line, you can Google it and find a great YouTube video. When I became a CEO for the first time, I was given a book to read by the board of directors on an initiative that was rolling out to integrate the culture across this company. Now, this company I worked for, I ran the Canadian company, which was part of a 290 billion, yes, billion, that was many years ago, conglomerate. It was a financial service company. And they had all these different cultures and they wanted to integrate them because the company wasn't efficient enough and everybody was doing things their own way, different cultures, different countries. The book is called The Oz Principle, OZ, based on the Wizard of Oz, the story. And what was really cool in it is there's many models of learning in it. One was called Above and Below the Line. It was being never lost on me. If you've heard of this, just bear with me for a moment while I ramble. So in order to solve a problem, you must go below the line. And what it means to be below the line is in order to see a problem, you need to be allowed to vent. or you can't see it. You have to go on a rant sometimes, be negative, get angry, blame other people. If I draw a line on a whiteboard, which I do sometimes when I'm working with people, and I'll point below, I'll say, okay, now team, or now John, you have 3 minutes. Let's stay below the line and get out what's on your mind. And then I'm going to coach and push you above that line. It's a great tool. You can use it, teach your kids it. It's a wonderful way to get people thinking positively. Here's the thing, to take the problem you see below the line and solve it, you can only do that when you think positive thoughts. The brain can't have a positive and a negative thought at the same time. I think you might know that. So therefore, if you're above the line, you can find solutions more easily. Owning this problem about fitting in, this problem about being different. I have a different wrapper. I look different. It's not your problem. It's not everybody else's problem. I've identified that's an issue growing up, but it's on me to solve it, not everybody else. And that's a complete shift in thinking that you own it. So I'm taking my own advice now. I'm going to vent. I'm going to go below the line. I promise you I'll only stay there for a couple minutes. But I've pulled out of my mind some of the key defining moments that I remember about how my wrapper became amplified because of other people's treatment of me. And some of this is hard to hear. I've written about some of this in a fictional way. But here we go. 4 different points, if you will. In school, in grade school and high school, I was bullied. And I know that word means different things, but I was bullied. I was called Hindu and raghead. I was ostracized because of my brown skin and that different wrapper. I'm not talking about Jay-Z here. No, I'm talking about I looked different on the outside, but I was the same as everybody else on the inside. I had a heart. I had organs and arteries. The thing is, I used to go home from school in tears, and my mom would always stand me up and say, don't you ever let those people say that they're better than you, because you're just as good as them. My mom was planting seeds in my subconscious that day, telling me you're just as good as them. Didn't take away the pain of being different. In business, as a new manager in the banking industry in the early 20s, I was referred to by a vice president publicly many times as the token nigger of the company. Now, you heard right. Just think about that. Being referred to as the token nigger publicly in your company. It was unbelievable. And at the time, I just shrugged and laughed it off. I didn't know how to respond to it. And there was this power thing. If I get mad, maybe I'll lose my job. And I was up and coming. But imagine that. And the person saying this to me was German, a tall, astute man, really nice person, very ignorant. And it was crazy. Next, at a business gathering of 500 employees, hosted by the regional vice president of the same company. We were at a downtown exclusive business club in Vancouver. And this club today is known as the Vancouver Club. It was a club where in the past only men were allowed to be patrons. That's all changed now, thank goodness. So this regional VP stands up, and at an opening speech, and this was a rally to inspire all of the employees to take a new direction in the company, he shouts out, "Is Dutta and so-and-so in the audience?" So-and-so is one of my colleagues, one of my fellow managers who happened to be from Uganda. He says, "Is Dutta and so-and-so here? How did you guys get in? You must have come in through the back door." Well, you can imagine at that moment that I started to sink into this emotional puddle. And everyone laughed or chuckled, even me. What else do you do when you're talked to that way? Well, inside I was heartbroken and looked across the room at my friend. And of course, I didn't see a smile on his face, but we kind of accepted that. But we didn't believe it. That's the key point. We didn't believe it because that's not who we were. My last story is my first marriage. My first marriage before my now life marriage to my astonishing Italian wife, Anna, was to a young Western Chinese girl. Met her side by side on the front line as a bank teller. She was wonderful. Don't get me wrong. Things sometimes just don't work out. I was 21 years old, but here's the thing. Unfortunately, her parents were from mainland China and they were prejudiced. I never understood this because my mom kind of covered up prejudice from us by teaching us, to ignore it, to think past it. They call me names. At dinner, we would sit and they would call me names in Chinese, and they initially forbid me from seeing their daughter. And when I picked her up. I had to go down to the corner gas station and meet her there. And for a few months, I wasn't allowed at the house. I didn't understand all that. And from this, even though their thinking shifted, these parents, I was always a guest at their table, a Hindu guest, a raghead at their table. I didn't even know what raghead meant. I was Canadian from South Asian parents. It was horrible. That's who I was. So in all of these moments I'm described to you, I could feel my mind shifting, and I made a decision to step up without selling out my traditional values so that I could fit in, to believe that I was not the guest at the table, but that was my table. Tony Robbins, who's a motivational speaker and a great teacher of millions of people around the world, including me, said many things to me. He said, Tom, human beings have basic human needs. Now, at the top of that list, by the way, are the following. Human needs: want to be loved and enough, feel enough. You want to be loved. We want to feel enough. He also said human beings have basic fears. And at the top of that list was the word fear of being rejected. Wow. Just think about what I said. From a child age, I was rejected by others for who I appeared to be for my wrapper. I was not loved or told I was enough in this new homeland called Canada. Thank you very much, Mom and Dad. Maybe I'll go find Eddie Murphy and we'll go out and have a party. For all of you listening now, and some of you might be saying, well, this was our country. Go home, Packy. I smile with my belief system made from giants like Gandhi, and I'll refrain from commenting because the motive of peace is far more powerful than the motive of hate. Instead, I will show you with my actions, nonviolent actions of stepping up without selling out. That is fitting in, everybody. To step out without selling out your values, that is fitting in. Now, I want to digress because I had a thought come into my head as I was saying that about labels. Now, this is one that really is my pet peeve. But when I watch the media, and particularly for all my friends down south, forgive me, I'm not being judgmental, but I just can't fathom how in a country with such wealth, with such intelligence, the media and people sometimes refer to others who have different wrappers by labels. Well, the blacks, the Hispanics. I mean, come on. I'm in Canada, and very rarely do you hear anyone on our media, or you hear in our dialogues, labels. We're Canadian. We're Canadian. And sometimes I might say I'm South Asian Canadian, but we're all Canadians. And the very nature of labeling people teaches the subconscious mind to believe that there's something different here. And so we got to treat people different. They're from a different class. I want to say that I'm not talking about immigration policy here. No, it's about one simple fact. How do you fit in when you appear to be different? How did Mowgli, the jungle boy, I was a Cub Scout, eventually went into Scouts. My father was a commanding officer in the British Army and then stayed in the Canadian Army in my homeland. Well, that was the first book that they got me to read, Mowgli. I loved it. I also loved the Disney movie. It was amazing watching it with my granddaughter. But how did he fit in with the animals who raised him? By becoming like them, by doing what they do, by loving their mutual differences, yet never selling out of his own values. And he had a different wrapper. Okay, now it's time to go above that line and share a little secret. As I prepared some talk notes before today, my hard drive crashed on my computer and I lost them. I'd been researching over time, I would say most of my life, and I just dumped some of those thoughts into a piece of paper, but it's gone. I've been researching by talking to others, immigrants, non-immigrants, in business, non-business, and observing areas of stepping up that were of interest to them. And I made a list of words on my paper. So what I've done is in front of me here in my studio, I have a jar. I have a glass jar with squares of paper, and on each of them are words. There's 8 pieces of paper. Now, I've been on talking to you for a while. You're going to need to stay to the end to hear all of them, and they'll do a wrap up for you. But I'll be pulling one piece of paper out of the jar, and off the top of my head, anything that comes to mind, one might say being authentic. I'm just going to say what I feel. I would say to you that that's the way of the quiet warrior. So please know, I'm only telling you what my parents taught me and the way I lived my life from what I know to step up without selling out my values to fit in. You know from some of the things that I've told you, and maybe you know from your own research, that 90% of what's told to us is not true. Believe it or not, 90% of what comes into our minds, into our hard drives, is told to us by others, and it's not true. You know, you're different. You're ugly. You're not good enough. You're never going to get that top job. You know, you're a woman. You should stay working in the home. Well, guess what? It's what you believe. Only the guy in the glass and the gal in the glass, when you're standing in the mirror, brushing your teeth and looking at that person, that's the only person that matters. No objections, period. It's what you believe you are. Now, let me get into those words. Let's pull the first one out of the jar here. All right. The first one is how we dress and personal hygiene. Now, this is a sensitive one, but let me just tell you that my mom was very instrumental in teaching here. We came to Canada from Fiji as Fijian Indian descent. Well, you know from that part of the world, some of the traditional where people dressed very differently. My mom always dressed us in the Western way. And my father, even though he was an electrician eventually, and then he went on to be a teacher at our Institute of Technology, and my dad always dressed, you know, in slacks and a nice shirt. He had a sweater on. He had a blazer. You know, when he was in the business world, he dressed to fit in like other people. My mom used to cook at home all the time, and let me just tell you, my mom is a wonderful cook. And my father's brother, my Uncle Frank, he was born in Fiji, and he married a Chinese woman. Now in Fiji, there's many Chinese people. So Fijian Chinese, they're beautiful people. My cousins, I have two cousins, look amazing, just blended. But why I'm telling you this is that when my mom was cooking, she was always cooking Indian food and Chinese food, not always, maybe day a week. But also she cooked the traditional food of the land. She learned to cook North American dishes to raise her children to know what to expect. You look around, and unless you go to your corner grocery store, that is maybe your ethnic store, most of the new world we come into has food and products that are from North America. I mean, it's a different culture. So my mom made the decision, she changed her belief to cook the way the land cooked and teach us what to expect. So our life would be easier. So we wouldn't have to always be searching for that traditional Indian store. But one thing was interesting is that she cooked the house filled with these incredible spices. If you've ever been to India, they call them dabas. They're all over the place. They pop up these places you can go eat. And I tell you that they do very well. A place called Punjab, which is in India, is really where a lot of the great Indian food we taste today in North America comes from. Just incredible spices, delightful, lighting up the bouquet in our noses. And yet, when you cook with those things, they go into your clothing, they go into your home. But my mom was smart enough to know that when she cooked, and I never forget it, she opened all the windows in the house, she put the fans on, and she closed the closet, so all of our jackets that we went out into the world with, all of our clothing was kept from that. And she had these sprays back then. You know, today there's nicer ones, Febreze and things like that, enzyme sprays that dissolve odors in the air. My mom consciously, when she cooked, using strong spices, made sure that we didn't walk out into the world smelling like last night's dinner. Now, I just want to say this, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but if I do, I'm sorry. You know, get over it. I've been at meetings where I've walked into a boardroom, I've sat down, and the person beside me, I can tell what they had for dinner. Whether they're South Asian or some other culture, it's horrible. And in this country, hygiene matters. How we dress matters to fit in. Hygiene matters. It's a personal choice. Now, I'm not saying that sell out your values and don't cook your traditional foods. I'm on a tangent here. That's not what I'm saying. Many of you know I'm a home cook. I'm a foodie. I watch all the great shows. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying some simple things that my mother, believe it or not, taught me. And nobody taught her that. She just instinctively figured out to fit in. That's what she did. And I never went to school or never went out smelling like last night's dinner. Let me talk about personal hygiene. Now, I'm not saying sell out your values if you have to grow your hair long or things like that. I mean, there's different looks, but please, you have a choice. And I might offend people by saying this, but you have a choice. And that is to shower and bathe and keep yourself personally personally in good shape, cutting your fingernails, grooming, whatever you want to call it. There's many more things. There's many people who don't realize in North America, to fit in, you have to look and play the part. And hygiene is a big deal. Now, I'm not suggesting that people purposely don't bathe, but in other parts of the world where maybe they're under, they're developing countries, maybe there's no access to as much water or clean flowing water, or the benefits of having personal hygiene like we do. You grow up maybe in that environment. Maybe you're showering every couple of days or 3 days or whatever it is, or maybe wearing the same clothes for several days, even though it might have odors of the home. It doesn't really matter, because maybe you leave and you go to the temple every day and that's where you hang out and you're back in your home country. I don't know. What I'm saying to you is that this is North America. And so I had to step up. My mom taught me, without selling out my traditional values. I still ate great Fijian Indian food, great Chinese food once in a while. I didn't sell those values out. I learned how to cook from my mom, but I learned how to make sure that when I left my home, I fit in. All right. I want to talk about belief in self. Back to what I was saying before, everything we believe about ourselves is within us. So I'm going to just say this, that if right now you have a belief system that you're not worthy, or because you look the way you do, you can't have the same kind of job, you're not going to climb the corporate ladder or get where you want to go because they just don't put people in those positions. Think about the world as it is today with not enough women in the workplace. Those are choices, and women have the responsibility to change it, to own it. And I hope I don't offend anybody by saying that, but sometimes the BS story that a woman can't be in leadership is just BS. Yes, you can. You have that choice to make. Stay at home, raise your children, or go and develop your career, or whatever you want to do. Open your own business. Do what you dream of, what your heart desires, because the belief that was put in you maybe comes from traditional parents. That the role of a woman maybe is to raise children. Maybe that's the way it was. And I'm not stereotyping here. I've interviewed recently a woman on my show who was Businesswoman of the Year in the United States. She's a senior executive with one of the biggest corporations, and she told me all this on my show. She said, we have to own that. We have to step up. I love that. Her show will be released soon, by the way. So believing in yourself, believe you're enough, believe that even though you have a different wrapper inside, you're the same. Believe like I did, that if I want to be a CEO, if I want to be in business, I can have anything I want. Remember that when you came to your country, if it's a country that allows freedom of choice, allows freedom of open market, commerce, that is why you came to your country, to experience the ability to fulfill your dreams. And the only one holding you back from those dreams is you. It's you. It's not anybody else. We can use the excuses of other people, but it's not. Some might say, yeah, that's great, Tom, but take a look at my life. As I described, I became a business person. I ran into the same barriers, by the way. When I was in business at an early age, I never saw managers of color. And even what I told you, the story of being referred to as the token nigger. So what? I didn't believe that about myself. And I always believed that. And in fact, that drove me harder to overcome those barriers, to set the stage for people who will come before me to be fitting in my career. And I was promoted, and I was promoted quickly. And I was promoted based on what I believe is something immigrants bring to countries like North America, and that is an ethic of hard work. You see, when you come from a country that maybe doesn't have as much as you find in your new homeland, you work harder. You work harder, you work smarter. Maybe you didn't know what a TV was. Maybe you didn't know what a nice car was. So therefore you come with a different belief system. And you just do whatever you need to do to make money, to look after your family. That is a lot of the work ethic. And I'm not taking away from people of the homeland who have the same work ethic, I'm sure. But I believe that that's the work ethic many immigrants come to a country like Canada, the United States with. They don't know any different. And so therefore believe that by taking your hard work and fitting in, you can climb the ladder to wherever you want in your career or in your life. Because I did it. And if I can do it with all the prejudice and the things I told you about, the one thing that kept me moving forward was what I believed was my mindset. Don't get me wrong, it was hard work and it was hurtful at times. But I had this belief system that was different. And it started with my parents making the conscious choice to step up without selling out their own values and fit into this new country. All right. You get the picture? All right. Let me pull out another piece of paper here. And oh, here's a good one, career. Well, we kind of meshed over that in the last comment. Let me just say that whatever career you decide, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you own your own business as an entrepreneur, you're self-employed, whether you work for somebody else, whatever you want to do, whatever you believe you can do, one thing is for sure that that's what you will do. Now, there's a lot of research out there by Robert Kiyosaki, his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, talking about careers. I use this in coaching. I think people need to understand that there's two ways you can create wealth, and wealth isn't always money, but creating wealth generally by starting a business that has systems and processes that can run itself eventually while you don't work your business is one way, and the entrepreneurs drive the economy in North America. And the second way is investing, but there's also risk involved. Owning a job, getting a job, that's not the way to create your own financial freedom. But many people are stuck in a job, and that's their path. I'm not judging no matter where you are, but I'm talking as somebody with a different wrapper. When I came into this country, that I just looked at what my dream was of creating my own future. I decided I wanted to be a CEO. That was my dream by the age of 40. And I went for it. And I didn't have any limiting beliefs. So let me just digress back to what that CEO said. Well, people of color, they don't get it. And my BS filter went up and said, no, sorry, park that. Thank you for telling me that. But I will be a CEO. And when you set your intention to becoming whatever you want, you will get there. Along the way, apply the learnings of stepping up without selling out your values. Let's talk about religion. Now, this is not a show where I like to talk about religion. I like to keep it separate, but I'm just going to go there for a moment. And here's the thing. My father was in the Mormon church back in Fiji when him and my mom met. She used to call him her little choir boy. And then he went in the army and he changed and he went back to his traditional Indian ways, which was Hinduism. And my dad, in the home, we had this little shrine in my dad's office where he had his stuff and his little religious book. And quite frankly, we saw him going to these pujas, they called it, and they're preaching and all that. And I never really had any issue with my dad doing what he was comfortable with. My mom, on the other hand, baptized us Catholic and raised us Catholic. We went to Catholicism in school, and my daughter went to a Catholic school. There are many types of religions out there, and I'm just saying that I believe I'm a man of faith. There's only one God, but I don't publicly talk about religion. I have a rule in my belief system that you don't tie religion and politics into business. You just don't. Otherwise, you divide people at the table. But my point is, if you come to a new land and you have religious, let's just say, beliefs that require you to do certain things, dress certain ways, attend certain types of churches or temples, that's fine. But fit into society, it's okay. But don't be out in society. This is what I know and what I was taught. You don't go out into society and preach your religion. You don't do that. You keep that within the doors of your holy place or your own home. And when you're out in society, you just fit in. You live a life like everybody else, knowing that you worship your God and you have your faith. Right? Don't be divided by religion in your new country. There are people I know who come to a country like Canada from countries like India, and their religious faith takes over their life. It guides them. And this is the part that's controversial. You have a choice. Are you willing to step up without selling out your values, your religious values? There's a way to do it. My father did it. He dressed the Western way. He taught us the Western way, right? My father practiced his Hindu values of his religion privately, right? There is a way, right? We don't have to always show it publicly. Let me just talk about marriage next. That just came out of the jar. It's in front of me here, and it's a big one. If you're an immigrant and you're married, great. If you were married in your home country and came to this country, things might be a little different. But what we're talking about here is my family. My family is the United Nations. They say that companies in the corporate sector where I grew up, my career, I'm going to digress here. I'm drawing a parallel, maybe a metaphor, that when companies merge, they bring different cultures together. By the way, I've been through 12 different mergers and transactions. Yeah, I know. People like to say, wow. And I go, yeah, my career was all messed up. But I was a change agent. They called me Tommy Gun, a hired gun, hired by boards and management teams to make change and build and grow companies. That's what I did for most of my career until I started my own company. And the thing is that every company has its own culture. I like to say culture is like, how do we all get along? How do we operate, and how do we work? How do we behave around here? That's my definition. Very simple, rudimentary. If I was explaining it to a 13-year-old, right? So many cultures come together in corporate America. Many mergers, they fail for two reasons. One, there's infighting or differences at the board level or the management level on what the new structure will look like. Because hey, some people are going to lose jobs. And number two, cultures, they never mesh. And the only path in what I know mergers is to create a new culture. In other words, with input from everybody after the companies come together, create a new culture, a future state, and assimilate to that culture over time. Now, what I've learned is that cultural change at the corporate level, deep cultural change, because we're talking about people in their lives, takes 5 to 7 years. It's not a quick work. So these companies that come together and start failing because they try to expect that everybody's going to work the same way together, they don't work very well. I'm going to digress on that and maybe say that the culture of a company is a culture of innovation where they encourage failure. They encourage doing new things. They give you money to go in an incubator and create new things. And then another company that they bolt together is one where status quo. You're not encouraged to fail. And if you fail, it's punitive. And, somebody puts their hand down on your desk, says, don't do that again. Having people come together in cultures takes 5, 7 years. It's deep change. People will leave. They won't stay. But the ones who step up without selling out their own values, what they knew in the past, and they adapt and change and fit into the new culture, they will stay and they'll be rewarded because that's what the company wants. That's what success looks like. I want to tell you that blended families are blending cultures together. My family is a melting pot, and Canada is an incubator for a new world, a world of tolerance. Let me just say to you that when you look at a picture of my family, you have me, Fijian Indian, and my wife, Italian, born in Rome, Italy, immigrating to Canada as a child. We have my daughter-in-law who married my stepson, Justin, who is Japanese. Parents are in Tokyo. She came here and met my son. My granddaughter, I have one granddaughter now. She's beautiful. She's 7 years old. I think I got that right. She's half Japanese, half Italian. My daughter, who's now 21 years old in university in the eastern part of our country, she is just beautiful. I'm biased, but she's beautiful. And she's got this beautiful olive skin. And she's half Italian, half Fijian Indian. Well, people say, look at your family. What's that? And I say, we're all messed up. We're the United Nations. And I smile. I sing it from the rooftop because I'm proud of that. Going back to my parents, they made the decision, the belief system to come to this country to give us opportunity. And one of those is marriage. And I'm going to get on a tangent here about arranged marriages in just a moment. So maybe, just maybe, a world where we all step up and fit in without selling out our traditional values. Maybe that can only be created by those like me and others who have blended cultures together. Let me just try to make my point clear. If cultures stay separate, the world can never be one. If cultures are blended through marriages that are blended, where children learn belief systems that are different, that are more advanced, they're more open to being tolerant about everybody coming together. Isn't that what is going to drive the future of the world? These are future leaders who will come into our companies and lead them, and they will not hold their parents' traditional belief systems. They will create new ones. I believe world peace and the growth of the world, even beyond this planet, will be because of the blending of cultures and families. I really believe that because I'm living it. I'm living proof of it. There is so much tolerance in my family because of all these different cultures coming together and everybody stepping up without selling out their values to fit in together, because we have to. If we don't fit in as a family, our family will blow up. No pun intended. I say go home if you want to create a country like the one you came from, or stay if you want to bring the gifts that you have, new ideas and opportunities for everyone to the new land, but preserving your heritage by fitting in. And some of the gifts that people bring through marriage and through coming to a new country, cuisines, food, different celebrations, uh, customs. But here's the thing, not forcing those onto the people in the new land, still celebrating them privately in your own homes, but not forcing that, and not creating communities with boundaries. In other words, all the black people live here and all the white people live here and all the South Asians live here. We have communities where I live on the west coast here of Canada that are primarily South Asian, but they're starting to change. They're starting to get blended. And that's the other thing I want to say is that my parents made a conscious choice to land here and live in a community that wasn't all South Asian, that didn't evolve that way. We grew up, started in Vancouver, but in another community called Delta, which was on the border of Surrey. Surrey is a very strong South Asian community. But my parents, they made the conscious decision to put us into uncomfortable places where we were forced to fit in and blend in. You get the picture? Where we were forced to step up. We didn't sell out our values. We were still South Asian. We still celebrated our culture, ate the way we wanted, but we fit in. And that is why I've been able to navigate by living in many communities and traveling to many communities around the world. Back to marriage again, blended marriage, blended families. Let me talk about arranged marriages. And it might be offensive here, and I don't mean to offend, but gosh, I've heard from so many people who come from another country and then have kids in this new land. They say it's our responsibility to find the husband for our daughters because we want to protect the family. And I call bullshit on that. I'm sorry. But if my parents had that belief system and they are traditional Indian, I would not be married to an Italian woman and have the picture I just told you about. So go back home, and if you want to raise your kids in that country, have arranged marriages, go home and do that. But in this country, what right do you have to tell your children? What right do I have to tell my daughter, my sons, who they should marry? And I'm sorry, but love, if you know anything about my life, I fell out of a relationship because I wasn't in love. Love does not happen by bolting people together. It does not happen that way. In fact, I'm going to not be too mean and honor all those arranged marriages that actually came together and people found love through that. But there's many, many stories, and people live in desperation of arranged marriages that were just for convenience, to protect the family, to populate the world with more of the same. I just think that if you're in another country where it's a melting pot, you let your children make their own decisions. And to all the children out there who are from traditional parents, make your own decisions, right? Believe in your own belief system that anything is possible. And just think about what you create for the future is going to change this world. If you want to fit in, it's okay to marry somebody from the same race that you're from. That's okay. But I believe that it's not up to a parent to impose their views and find the right match for their child. I just don't. And I'm living proof of that. And my parents, for all of those calling BS on me for saying that, who might be from traditional values, you're criticizing my parents because my parents shifted their belief to step up without selling out those values. And my parents made the conscious decision when they came to this country to say, well, it's different there. So if we have to fit in, otherwise they would have stayed back in Fiji and raised us and maybe, found a mate for perhaps, my daughter would have found ourselves into a same race marriage. I don't know. I mean, that's one that I can talk more about another time and go on and on and on about, but I'm very, very focused about my belief on that it was my parents who taught me that. It wasn't anybody else. I come across so many others who don't believe in that. And what are you afraid of by letting your children have choice to be happy? Because here's the thing, after my parents are long and gone and my dad passed away unexpectedly over a year ago, when they're gone, it's just us. And don't you want your children to be happy? And for those who are in families where arranged marriages matter, you don't have to dishonor your parents, but you have a choice. And when you become an adult, you can make that choice and move out. And it'll create some pain, but eventually the parents will accept you. Because here's the thing, our parents will always love us no matter what the wrapper is of the person that we marry. All right, let me get back off my soapbox there. So that's a little bit about marriage. Here's the next piece of paper talking about language and names. Let's be quick on this one. My name is Tom. My father's name is Ashok, and Ashok is an Indian name. Well, I have four names: Thomas, Ashok, Harold, Dutta. If you look at my passport, it's like, what? I could never be a hockey player because you can't fit all that on the back of a jersey. But I'm going to be serious and tell you that my parents knew that if we come to the new land, naming us something that doesn't make us appear different, doesn't make us someone who will get picked on because you can't pronounce our name. My parents, that was their belief system, and it was the right one for us and for the time. Nobody has trouble with my name, and yet the thing is, when I get on the phone and I'm talking to somebody I haven't met before, they're not going to judge me because they don't all right off the bat have something to have a barrier with, some foreign name they can't understand and pronounce. Now, I know I'm going to get whacked for saying these things because there's going to be people saying, how dare can you say that about the beautiful names? I'm not saying that. My second name is Ashok. That's my dad's name. My third name is Harold, which happens to be the doctor that delivered me. Thank you, Mom and Dad. But there's ways to deal with naming our children. My younger brother is named Glenn. And when you ask my parents, why did you name him Glenn? Well, because Glenn Campbell, a Western singer, my parents loved his music. In fact, Glenn Campbell played guitar, and I was inspired to learn guitar through my dad because of Glenn Campbell. We listened to the 8-track tapes in the car all the time of Glenn Campbell. So my brother's name is Glenn. My older brother's name is Rob, probably named after another uncle in the family. But we all have Indian names embedded in our legal names. You can name your children if you're back in your home country anything you want that to fit in there. But just remember, it's a choice to name them something that still has meaning. You can add to their names, their second or third names, but something where they have to own it, they have to live with it, and fitting in. I think that matters. So that's my rant on names. And then language. When you come to a country that has a different language, my parents taught us the way of the land to speak English. I went to school and learned to speak English. I know many immigrant families, and I honor them that teach their children in the home by speaking their native tongue. Well, here's the thing. If in the first 10 years, everything we hear gets embedded in us as children, and we learn to speak that language, we never learn to assimilate. We can't communicate. It's scary for children who come to a new country. Even if they're born in another country with a different language, it's kind of scary to come to a new country and go to school and not being able to understand your friends. I interviewed a woman who came from Mexico. She's a young lady, 21 years old. And I talked to her, and she said when she came from Mexico, she said it was scary. She couldn't even understand what kids were saying in school. So just remember, step up. If you're a parent, step up and want your children to fit in and not sell out the values of traditional names, but what do you think it's going to be like with your children with the name that they carry in their new country? And again, for all of those who've come from another country, name their children traditional names from their old country, I honor that. I'm not criticizing you. I'm telling you what my parents did, which when I look back was the best thing that helped me fit in and not, again, look different on the outside. So language matters. There's applications now on the internet and on our phones where we can learn different languages. There's so many cool ways we can learn the language. My parents in our home spoke Hindi, which is their own dialect, to each other sometimes, but they didn't speak that way around us. And they always spoke to us in English. And they learned English on the way in here in our country. All right, we got a couple more here, and then we'll move to wrapping up. I'm sure you've been madly making notes here and saying that, geez, Tom's a guy who's really stepped up without selling out his values. Thank you for saying that if you are, because that is absolutely the case. I want to talk about education here, and this will be a bit controversial, but I'm thinking about India and what I know from my roots. There is a stigma around education that I hear from immigrants in this country who come from that country that you have to have an MBA and a degree. And here's the thing, and I'm going to probably, turn this upside down a little bit for you. I have had a career coach as a CEO, and I've gone through my life, and I did not get a degree right out of school. My home was broken. My dad was an alcoholic. Things fell apart. If you read my book, the first chapter is called The Boy, you'll know that. There was no money, and I spent most of my teen years, helping my mom and helping sell the house and getting her through an ugly divorce and dealing with my own trauma. And I went right into the workforce, encouraged by my mentors to go work. I read a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and Hill taught me that the education system has got it wrong. And I believe this, and I'm not asking you to believe it, it's what I know. And he says that a lot of education people get, they don't apply it in their careers or their lives. They come out with these pieces of paper with little letters, but they don't apply it. And so, Hill says that today, on demand, you can find the education you need. So I, for example, went into business, climbed the ladder, became a CEO. For those of you who know the role of a CEO, writing a strategy, a strategic plan for a company, which envisions the future, and then setting the actions, goals, business objectives below that to achieve that is vital. The CEO owns it. I didn't know what a strategy was, and I was 31 years old. So I went to Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and I had the board of directors of my company pay for that. And I took a 1-week intensive course on strategic planning. I learned all about it, and then my career took off in that direction. What I'm saying to you here is that whether you have to learn skills to do strategic planning, or you have to learn skills to be an electrician like my father, you can on demand get your education. Tony Robbins taught me when I first met him that he had a list. He said in the first part of his life, he read 200 books. You can get a university degree and be smarter than people with degrees just by reading different books. I read on average 4 a month. I listen to them through Audible, my audiobook service, but you can do it in different ways. You can get book summaries, but I choose topics that I want that are linked to my goals and my vision of what I'm trying to do. Now, going back to this so that my daughter and others who are in university don't get upset with me, university is important, yes, but let your children have the opportunity to make their own decisions. Guide them, if you're in this country, that when they're finished school, to look at their goals and their dreams and then find the education that will help them. But in this country where sometimes buying a home is $1 million or a few $100,000, taking 5, 6, 7 years of your life before you begin earning any income. And yet I've heard parents traditionally from India preaching to their kids that they have to get their MBA, putting all this pressure to get these degrees. And by the way, those degrees are worthless in the workplace. They just don't do anything. They give you the ability to open doors and perhaps be different than the person next to you, but they aren't applied in many cases, unless you're going into a field like engineering or something that is specific. They're not always applied in the work that you do. So if you do go to university and become a doctor, great. You already know you're going to be a doctor. But so many people I've met, so many immigrants have gone to university, young immigrants, because their parents told them they had to, taken degrees that they didn't even know they wanted, come out and found out that at heart they're an entrepreneur and they don't really even need that psychology degree because they never ever went into that. When I had a career coach through my first downsizing, I had a career coach who said, in today's world, and this was 20 years ago, a 10 years experience can offset a degree. Let me say that again. 10 years experience can offset a degree. When I was hiring people for my management team, I would have resumes in front of me on my desk that were vetted by our HR department. And I would have 2 people side by side. And I would see one with an MBA or a degree and really strong experience. And I would see another without a degree, but stronger experience. I would generally choose the person with street smarts and more experience because I wanted that person to hit the ground running and apply their knowledge and experience as knowledge. So let me just back up and say that my belief system, my parents is that they wanted to come to the land and give us the opportunity to educate ourselves. But they didn't come with a rule book that said it had to be 3 letters beside our name. They came with the rule book that whatever makes sense for us, they will support it. Now, everything's different. If you have a child or you have children who perhaps aren't focused or maybe got off on the wrong track, yes, you can guide them, get a coach, get a mentor, get somebody third party to school them and help them understand, what education they might need. But degrees only, probably not the best thing to put the pressure on our children unless, they really want to do that. Now, I'm on a tangent here, but I just want to also say that there's a great body of work by futurists, and a futurist sees the future. Many of them predict based on trends, and there's a great futurist on YouTube, and I just had this thought, so I can't remember his name, but he says the future of education is unknown. That universities are struggling today developing programs to teach because the world is changing so fast that the companies that are here today in 10 years will be extinct. A high percentage of the jobs, especially technology jobs, aren't even created yet. And so if you go to university and get a degree, how do you know that that is going to help you when you get out into the workplace? That's the world we're living in. So much to think about there, but the bottom line is when it comes to education, uh, this is a land of choice if you're in North America. Guide your children, but please don't put the pressure on your kids that they have to have a degree. I once had somebody who was at a high level say to me, and it was very hurtful. When I launched my book and my book became a bestseller in a couple of countries, I said, "Geez, I'd like to go to to this country, my homeland." And he looked me in the eye and said, they won't care about you there because you don't have a degree." I was hurt, man. I had 30 years experience all over the place as an executive, more experience than anybody has just a degree, and I actually have a diploma from university, a 3-year diploma I did as an immature student. I also have certificates from Queen's University in 3 different areas. I have my certified financial planning designation, so I could hang a shingle and be a financial planner tomorrow. I have certificates in conflict resolution. I'm certified to teach personality science. Almost have the background of a psychologist given the 10 years of learning. I have so much education, but it doesn't have 3 little letters attached to it. And so please don't dismiss people who don't have degrees. And secondly, degrees are awesome and valuable. I'm not dismissing that. But don't put the pressure on your children. You came to a new land to give them choice. All right, let me get off my soapbox there. I'm sure I've got some people happy and some people a little frustrated. Uh, just deal with that. Let's move on. Here's the next one: networking and social media. I love this because I watch sometimes on my own Facebook people I know who are from South Asia, and you see some who all they do is post videos of dances they go to and images of things that are all Indian, and you go like, all this person's life is Indian. And right away, for me, there's a barrier that this person isn't fitting in. They're not stepping up, and they want you to know that the only thing that matters is their own culture. I'm sorry, that may not be the intent, but that's the perception. Remember, perception matters here. So when you're networking as an immigrant, find a way to be comfortable, and you can learn the skills to network, but be comfortable going out and meeting people in areas where it's not just your culture. Go to Chamber of Commerce meetings, go to meetups, business meetings, have coffee, meet people, go shop at stores where everybody shops, not just the traditional Indian store down the street. Basically assimilate, get into places where you're networking across cultures. You're going to pick up like a sponge and learn. You're going to become more comfortable, and you don't get pigeonholed as the guy who just goes to Indian events. I know somebody who runs companies, and they just hire people from their culture, and they're just attending events and business functions where they're comfortable because they're not comfortable stretching outside of that. Unfortunately, when you're in Canada or even the United States, businesses across cultural lines. So network across cultural lines. And please, on social media, consider posting things that are not just from your homeland or from your own culture, but celebrate Thanksgiving, celebrate attending an event where you met people from other cultures, show other people that you care. I want to talk about rapport for a minute. It's a word that came into my mind as I was saying that. It relates to networking. When you're in rapport with someone, very quickly in the first 2 minutes of meeting with them, then psychologically they want to follow your next suggestion. They're comfortable having more conversations. And rapport is really when somebody says, that person is just like me. When you're networking, you want to find something in common with the other person quickly that connects you and makes that person feel like they want to be with you. This whole metaphor about stepping up without selling out and fitting in is kind of like that. If I show up and I've got a different wrapper on, I look different, brown guy, black hair, well, very quickly, I want the other person to look at me and say, he's just like me. Well, one of the ways I can do it is dress the lay of the land, be groomed in hygiene, the way, people dress and are groomed in hygiene in this country. Maybe be in the same place that that person likes to hang out, whether it's a Starbucks or somewhere where everybody goes. And all of a sudden I become someone who is like fitting in. And it's so very simple to think about fitting in by just being like the other person, finding a way to be like the other person. It doesn't change the fact that I'm South Asian and I have my own values. I have different things I do privately. But when I want to show the world I fit in business, and when I'm networking just socially, that's what I do. Right. Awesome. All right, let's talk about community. This is on the last one on the list, and it's important to me. I mean, I love watching Anthony Bourdain's shows where he does his shows at different locations, for example, in the United States and around the world, where he's featuring the cuisine and the cultures. It's awesome, and we don't want to lose that. My talk today is not about losing distinction. All right, it's about fitting in, and so when we build communities, we want to move into a land and don't just make the first choice and say, because I'm South Asian, I'm going to go find the Indian community and move in their neighborhood. Challenge yourself to move into a neighborhood that's different. One of the ways to force yourself to change is to go out of your comfort zone. In coaching, people ask me, well, what's the job of a coach? A coach isn't to be your friend. A coaching is to get a contract from you to be able to, make change or accomplish something you want to accomplish. And I hold you accountable for it. When coaching is working, it's when I have you uncomfortable in an uncomfortable space. When we're uncomfortable, that's the point where we're willing to change. So when it comes to moving into communities, my parents, they made the decision to move us into communities that weren't all just South Asian people, where we could feel comfortable, just continue to talk the same language and eat and look and dress and do things the same way. No, my parents knew that to help their children grow and develop, put them in places where they might look different and stand out, but they had an opportunity to adapt and fit in. And so I grew up, as I said, on the border of a South Asian community. And then from there, we moved to a more middle class community. And the school I went to in high school, I was the minority. And at the time, I thought it was hard. But truthfully, I look back and thank my parents now, because if it wasn't for that experience, I wouldn't have been able to step up and fit in the world. I wouldn't know the rest of the world. One of the reasons why getting on a plane and going traveling and learning about other cultures, other cuisines, other parts of the world, and you come back, you have this world view. Getting outside your comfort zone if you're an immigrant is absolutely vital. Just because your belief system says, I belong in that little corner because that's what people think of me. Remember what I said, the guy in the glass, the gal in the glass looking back at you, that's was put in you. That's not true. Nobody wrote the rule book that when you come to the new country, you have to go and find that little corner where you belong, because you belong everywhere. Step up. Don't sell out your values, but fit in. All right. Let me move to wrap up now. I'm not even sure how long we've been here, but we've been on this talk for, I'm sure, well over an hour. When you come to another land, you need to do everything to fit in and still preserve your own traditions. However, if traditions openly prevent you from fitting in, you and no one else, you have the power to make the decision to fit in or not. We can't change others' perspectives of who we are, right? We can only work on ourselves. Stepping up without selling out is fitting in. And fitting in is a choice. We can fit in by sharing our stories of struggle, unleashing the courage to break that stigma of being different by stepping up and fitting in. It is your choice. Whatever you believe, one thing is certain, and I know this from my experience, you are absolutely right. Whatever you believe shapes your actions. It creates the life you have. Not someone else's beliefs. Your beliefs matter. My final comment before I go is in the form of a question. I want you to ask yourself, if you're a foreigner to a land that is not your birthplace, what are your limiting beliefs that may be holding you back in those 8 areas that I talked about? Dress and personal hygiene, belief in yourself, career, religion, marriage, language, education, networking and social media, and community. Write them down and then make choices to eradicate even one of them that's going to open the door to allow you to step up without selling out your values and fit in. When you do that, the world will change. It'll be a better place. Everybody, thank you very much. This has been quite an honor to share, I think, for a long time on this show. And I'm just blessed to be living in a country that offers the freedoms to be a South Asian man having a different wrapper and to be able to fit in and know how to do it, because my parents made the conscious decision to change their beliefs to help us be successful in a new country. Listen to this show on iTunes or your favorite podcast channel. I would appreciate it as the host and producer of the show if you would give it a rating, and please share it to pass on anything that might help someone else. Have a blessed day.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. KRE-AT is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.KREAT.ca